This is the Mann Packing Field Report for December. Today we're going to discuss Broccolini, Salinas Valley plantings, as well as Yuma supply situation, and talk with Frank Garcia and Craig Johnson of Ag Operations for Mann Packing. Hey Frank, tell us a little bit about Broccolini.
So right behind me we got Broccolini planted. We planted here on August 28th and harvesting now. It is a variety called Asparag, and it is a hybrid of broccoli and kailan, and we have it here year round.
Now, obviously the weather is, in the morning it's been like super cold, 34, 36 degrees. Does that have anything to do with the growth patterns of Broccolini?
Actually, it makes it a little harder. As we're coming from the fall to winter, the broccoli starts acclimating. And what we're concerned a little bit is about pithiness, but we never see those issues on Broccolini. It's a very hardy crop, and it's made to withstand the cold weather.
Now, do we harvest here year round?
We do. We harvest here year round. Part of our Broccolini goes down south to Mexico, just across the border from Yuma, Arizona, and we harvest there for approximately 19 weeks.
Now, down in Mexico, is the ground a little bit different than up here in the Salinas Valley?
Just a little bit. I mean, it has a combination of sandy loam, sandier loam down there, and we have a little bit heavier ground up here.
Awesome. And then tell me a little bit about the harvesting techniques that we use here.
Broccolini is kind of a specialty crop where we have to pinch it off in the middle, and then here during this time frame it takes about 12 to 15 days before we can go back in there and harvest it. It shoots off to the sides, and that's where we harvest the shoots of it, and that's what makes the Broccolini. And then we have our harvesting crews that cut the Broccolini and bunch it up to our specs for our customers.
Awesome. And then flowering. Broccolini naturally flowers. How often does that happen?
It happens with, it's temperature related. Obviously, it flowers more in the summertime because the days are longer. We got longer growing conditions. It does flower. We'll get in there with the crew and actually take some of that flower off and go in there and harvest the shoots.
So Frank, transition from Salinas to Mexico and Mexico back to Salinas. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we live part of our Broccolini here year-round in the Salinas Valley, but we do transition about 3/4 of our program down to Mexico during the winter time for about 19 weeks. We start planting over there in August. It goes through the heat, and then we start harvesting right around the middle of about the end of November or so. And then we'll finish in Mexico here on the 18th of December, and all plantings will be done here in the Salinas Valley.
Craig, so we're in the heart of the Salinas Valley and we're gearing up for planting season. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing you'll notice is if you're driving around the valley, there's absolutely no lettuce out of the ground right now. So we're at the back end of the lettuce-free period, which happens every December, the middle 2 weeks of December. And so the growers are just now starting to plant the early fields of lettuce. And that'll happen here this week and next week, and it'll emerge out of the ground after the period ends.
And what about the rain? How does that help or not help?
The growers love the fact that they got some early rain that'll allow them to hold off on pre-irrigating the fields.
So that gestation period, or the period that we're not planting, it's because of the mosaic virus?
Yes. It was instituted several decades ago where December 7th through the 21st, there's no lettuce growing in the valley actively to minimize the amount of hosts for that virus. But it's vectored both by insects, and it can also be transported in the seed. So not only do we have a lettuce-free period to combat the virus overall in the valley, all the seed in the Salinas Valley is assayed for mosaic virus before it's allowed to be planted.
And as far as that is concerned, other crops are being planted right now as well?
Yes. So the cold crops, the brassicas, we start planting those. In the case of Broccolini, back in September, we start planting that. In the case of broccoli, we're doing that mostly in November. We start the plantings for the spring harvest. Cauliflower, you can see that in the ground nearly year-round with young transplants and maturing heads both. We're going to actually get to about the first of the year before we put our first snap pea planting in the ground. And we'll go from there with successive plantings. All the different types of lettuces kick off kind of at the same time, and they all start harvesting when we finish up the desert in late March or early April.
So we're fully transitioned down to Yuma, and right now it looks like for the next 10 days we've had some difficulties when it comes to cold. We've seen lettuce ice, we've seen harvest delays. Can you discuss a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, the cold weather in general will slow down the maturity of the plant, whether it's lettuce, romaine, or even some of the broccoli crops and cauliflower. They'll just slow down, and so you won't ever have an excess because they're constantly being delayed just because of the weather. But in the case of some of the lettuce plants, as you get into freezing weather, the outer epidermis will burst and you'll end up with a brown spot eventually as it oxidizes. We call that lettuce ice, or we call it blistered ribs and things like that.
Now, does that affect our yields?
It can. So once it gets severe enough, then you're on the romaine program, you're actually tearing off more of the outer leaves, so you're generating less tonnage out of the field. You know, some of that's absorbed in the marketplace with a little bit of a defect once we quote that, but generally you do have some loss there. But what you'll find here as we get into these periods of time, pockets when we have cold weather, that it's really dependent on how you built your program. A lot of the shippers start out east with the higher elevation in an area that it cools down sooner and is more appropriate for the lettuce and the romaine. And then as you get into the season, we come back into the Yuma area there and we start working in those areas. But each different area around there can have pockets where the lettuce ice hits it a little bit worse, either because of geography or some other feature of the terrain. We foresee a good couple weeks of growing, and we expect the volumes to improve a little bit and yet still be steady and without overrunning anything.
Well, thank you for tuning in to Mann Packing's December Field Report. Hope you learned a little bit about broccolini, the Salinas plantings, and Yuma supplies. So from us at Del Monte and Mann Packing, wishing you a happy holiday season and a happy new year.